Hello, everyone. It is Unfound Live for February 26th, 2020. I hope everybody is doing well. I see some people are already in here, even though I'm getting in a couple minutes early. I see Whitney and I see Nicole. I see one of my assistants, Carrie. I hope you're all doing well tonight. Hello, Jasmine. And there's Cherie, the wench with the wrench. Love that. Sure. I think that's something new, right? Hello, Laura. Thank you for everybody tuning in tonight. We have a possibly long program. I could just see how it goes this evening. And Laura, another Laura, is tuning in. And then there's Anne. Thank you all for tuning in. If you are watching this for the first time, Unfound Live is a show I have been doing since late 2017, where I guess the way I would put it is we kind of loosen, our ties up a little bit. And this is a little bit more laid back forum than what you would hear with the episodes every Friday. We get into a lot more theorizing on this program, on this particular show on Wednesday nights, about other cases out there, whatever's in the news, etc., than I would ever do in an interview situation. It also gives me an opportunity to talk about some other cases, maybe talk about some missing person theory. And also, though, it gives all of you, any viewers, a chance to ask me questions about anything that comes to mind, as long as it's PG rated and it's not too personal. It can be true crime related. It doesn't necessarily have to be that. So that is what this show is. Once again, I think just like the think tank that we have on Sunday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern for premium Patreon members, this show is, I believe, one of a kind. I think that I'm one of the few podcast hosts out there who does the program, records it, releases it, to iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, etc., but then who also hosts a live show where the viewers and listeners can talk to me, not necessarily one-on-one, but have a conversation with myself, with other listeners in an open forum. And we can talk about a lot of things that are in the news and a lot of things that are going on with this program. So I don't know how many other podcast hosts really do that, whether it's in true crime or anything else. But I do enjoy doing this. I look forward to Wednesday nights, and I love getting prepared to talk to all of you. Anne and Angela, Christine, Susan. Yeah, don't forget the thumbs up, as Sherry is saying. Yeah, as you're watching, if you can figure out how to do it, whether on your computer, your tablet, or your phone, I would appreciate if you could give the video the thumbs up as you are watching. That certainly helps bump up the algorithm on YouTube, so other people who are maybe looking for true crime content can find this show and maybe watch it as a rerun and maybe tune in live next week. Thank you for reminding me, Cherie. Mandy and Honey Wheels, Nicole, Valerie, thank you all for tuning in. So that's what we do here on Wednesday nights. It's not, like I said, not quite as newsy and official and prim and proper as we do on Fridays. This is a little bit different. This is why I call this a show, whereas I really, really hesitate to call the episodes that come out on Fridays shows, because to me that designates something different, especially since I come from an entertainment background. Hello, Paula. What's going on? So what's going on with me? I had this past weekend off, and that was nice. And I'll be having this next weekend off. I have the next few weekends off. And then I will be having a disc golf tournament about an hour and 20 minutes north of here on the weekend of the March 15th. So however long that is from now, maybe 3 weeks from now. So that'll be coming up. And until then, I'll be having some weekends off, although I'm still playing some disc golf. In fact, this past Sunday morning, I did play in a club that plays over here at my local park, which is Taylor Lake Park in the city of Largo. That's the nearest park to me. Thank you for giving me those thumbs up. So I've just been trying to get work done as usual. Taking some phone calls. I've gotten most of Friday's episode already recorded and the interview edited. So I'm excited about that, although I still have some work to do tomorrow. I have to make a couple phone calls tomorrow, as is usual. And then this weekend, Emily has a couple other phone calls lined up for me. That's usually what's going on. But pretty much pretty laid back here these days. Last couple days have been kind of ugly. It rained here today, windy, kind of cooler, and it's going to remain cooler here in Clearwater Beach through the weekend. I don't know what the precipitation is going to be, but it's definitely cooling off here. And so that's really about it. Not much else going on in my private life at all, really. I'm boring. I've gotten out a few times to go to Starbucks and get work done there so I don't become a total hermit. And I've gotten to know the baristas at a couple different places really well on a first name basis now. They know who I am. I know who they are. So that just shows you how often I frequent these two different places. But that's where I usually go when I'm not at home to get some work done. Probably the biggest thing that has happened with the program, this week is that I, through the work of one of the newest assistants I have, Natasha, who is mainly responsible for YouTube and the website. And the website's getting redone. In fact, we have a new internet address for the website. But I don't know if I want to talk about it just yet because I don't think Natasha totally has it where she wants it yet. So we're not going to get into that right at the second. But a new website is in the works as I speak. But Natasha she does live here in Florida, but down in Southeast Florida. And she had contacted a professor down there, Dr. Grace Telesco. And she is a professor in their a show that she does right here on YouTube. And Natasha linked me up with Dr. Telesco, and I got to talk to her yesterday morning. And got along really well. I was really excited to meet her. We spoke for about a half an hour. And what we arranged is that on April 9th, which is a Thursday evening of April 9th, 7 p.m. Eastern time, I will be going down to, I'll make the drive, no big deal, down to like the Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Davie, Florida area. And I will be coming on her program. For once, somebody is going to be interviewing me instead of me interviewing somebody. And so we're going to be talking, I guess it's going to be an hour show. We're going to talk about missing persons issues. We're going to talk about the current, once again, she sets the agenda, but I'm guessing. I have a pretty good idea of what we'll be talking about. We're talking about the current state of missing persons cases, investigation. We're going to talk about how I got into doing this program, what my motivation is, and how I view missing persons cases and where it needs to go in the 21st century as far as investigation and the public attitude. But we're also going to talk at least about one missing persons case that Unfound is covered. And I will be required to pick one out, which, as you know, for me is very difficult because I view them all as the same, no matter how many downloads they get. how much attention Unfound gets for covering a particular case, I see them as all the same, always, always. And I have, though, an idea of which one I'm going to pick after thinking about it after we spoke yesterday, but I'm not going to reveal it right here. She will be first to find out the one that I think that we should discuss, and then all of you will find out. I will tell you, obviously, before I go on the program, but of course, she deserves to find it out first. So I'm very excited about this. And this is going, as I've talked about, although I kind of let it slip through the cracks in 2019, is that we're moving forward with my desire to go to college campuses and speak to students, law enforcement majors, psychology majors, journalism, media majors, about what I've learned doing this program over the last 3.5 years. I think that I have a lot of usable real world material that I can pass on to these younger generations about a whole host of different topics, things that I've learned. And most of it has been on the job training, things that I didn't know before I started the program. And I'm really looking forward to this. And, and in this particular situation with Dr. Telesco, I'm not going to be up in front of people speaking. This is going to be a one-on-one interview on video on YouTube. But I think I'm still very excited about it. It's a great opportunity, and I'm really looking forward to it. And I really hope that April 9th gets here very quickly, because I'm really looking forward to it. So I appreciate her giving me the opportunity to do this. She's a former, even though she's here in Florida, she was with the NYPD for 17 years. She has academic experience teaching students about law enforcement, other issues. And it's, I think it's the best of both worlds there. So that's what's going to be going on in this interview. I'm sure that hour when we get there will go very quickly, as it does when I speak to all of you. But like I said, this is pushing forward with my desire to get onto campuses and speak to students. And I think that's where my strength lies. In fact, I'll be perfectly honest with all of you that I am much, and maybe this is just the way my head is, I don't know. I'm way more excited. I have a much higher desire to go onto college campuses, to speak to students, speak to classes, that type of thing. That interests me way more than ever doing any TV show. Just kind of the way I am. I don't know why that is. I think that most podcasters would pick the opposite, would want to get, that TV show on Oxygen or whatever. I don't know. I think that, I don't know, just the way my personality is and everything. And I've had an opportunity to do that years and years ago when I lived in Las Vegas, and I really enjoyed it. Of course, it wasn't about missing persons cases, but I really, really enjoyed it. And so to be able to go onto a campus, speak to a professor, and do an interview, I'm really looking forward to it. So you'll hear me talk about it, and you'll see me posting about it and everything else up until that day on April 9th at 7 p.m. So I'm very excited about it. Now, I shouldn't forget, though, that just within this past weekend, I completed, this is moving on to something else, but Dr. Telesco, if you are going to watch this tonight, I appreciate the opportunity. I can't wait to meet you in person. I'm really looking forward to us doing your show together. Moving on to something else, though, as I told you probably about in January, a listener who is a professor at a university in Louisiana has also approached me about coming up to her school and speaking to students, much more, what I've talked about, speaking to students. And I was finally able to put a a presentation outlined together, very long. And I emailed it to her a few days ago, and I'm hoping that's going to happen in the next, let's say, 6 weeks. So I have that going on as well. I sent her a long, sent her a very that I could talk about, and I don't know how much time I'm going to be given or how many classes or anything like that, but she is free to pick and choose those items that she wishes me to talk about. And so I'm excited about that as well. So we got two really, really good things going on here. I'm very excited about them. And because I do believe that that is the way that we can start changing what is going on with missing persons investigations. I think that has to start there. I think that police officers who have been doing it 20, 25 years, I think they're too set in their ways. And so we have to get to younger generations. And so I'll try to do my part. I think I have a responsibility to do that. And so that's what's going on. And that's something new. I want to thank Natasha for being very successful in reaching Dr. Telesco. And I want to send a shout out to that listener. She knows who she is, who contacted me and said that she would love for me to come up and speak. So I'm hoping we can make that happen before the end of this semester. Once again, one is the interview situation with Dr. Telesco is down in South Florida. This other situation would be up in the state of Louisiana. So there you go. That's something. I know I've been talking here for a while. Let's see what everybody's saying. People are talking about how chilly it is in Florida. It's been chilly, really chilly. Hello, Michelle and Kathy. Hello, and Tanya. Talking about the weather. Paula, will it be anywhere where we can watch and listen? Well, my interview with Dr. Telesco will be online. She has I think if you look up, it's at Nova Southeastern University, Fischler School of Psychology and College of Criminal Justice, something like that. I didn't write it all out. But I think that if you were to do a search on YouTube for Dr. Grace Telesco, Paula, I think you would find what's going on there and what she does. And of course, you could do a Google search and find out who she is and all the classes and what they do at Nova Southeastern University. So yeah, it will be online. It will be free. It will be on Facebook, actually. Should have brought that up. It's actually on Facebook. It's on YouTube. I messed that up. It's going to be a Facebook live show, not a YouTube show. Messed that up. I guess I'll have some weeks to correct that. But it's going to be on Facebook. Facebook Live at 7 p.m. Eastern, April 9th. So if you go onto Facebook and you do a search for Nova Southeastern University, Fischler School of Psychology and College of Criminal Justice, it's something like that, you will find it. And she's done at least one interview that I've watched. And once again, excited to do it, but it's not on YouTube. I apologize. It'll eventually be on YouTube because, as you know, Facebook does save those videos, and I'm sure she will allow me to post that to this channel right here. But when we do it live, it'll be on Facebook. That's how you spell it, Michelle. Cherie says that's my writer's brain, that I want to talk to college students. That may be right. Cherie may be right about that. I don't know. I never wanted to be a teacher. My father was a teacher for 35 years, and frankly, I'll be honest, hated it. Maybe that was what influenced me to maybe not go into that profession. But I think what I'm talking about here, not being a professor or a teacher, but being able to speak to people and do presentations and seminars, things like that, are certainly something that I'm very interested in. Michelle says, amen, me too. Going to high school is probably going to save lives. Do it for sure. Well, it's not going to be high school. It's going to be colleges, Michelle. Christine says, I finished your book, Ed. I also did a 5-star review. I love that. And ordered another book today. Excited to get season 1. Christine, thank you so much. I can't thank you enough. Thank you. Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Valerie. Michelle says, I know people who go to junior middle school and give safety classes to at-risk youth. Yes, of course. Carrie, asked her to drop link in discussion group. I could do that, Carrie, for sure. So, okay, that's a good idea. So that's what's going to go on. Once again, April 9th, 7 p.m., Facebook Live at the Nova Southeastern page, College of Criminal Justice. And then at some point, maybe around the same time, I have not worked out anything yet with this university in Louisiana, but that will not be live. But I will film it. I've already arranged for whenever it happens, for my brother Brian to come with me, and I will use my phone to videotape it. And so that will eventually go on this channel right here as well. Of course, it'll be long, maybe an hour long or hour and a half. I don't know. But I certainly do plan on filming it because, that's a good way for people to more people find out about it. And I'm hoping that will then lead to more invitations to speak at other schools. So that's what we're going to do there. Let's take a question. Now, April, last Friday's guest, asked me this. April Grant and we're going to talk about Eric Alvarado's disappearance. And of course, we always talk about the poll from the preceding case. But April asked me if any of the cases that Unfound has covered have been solved. And April, if you're watching, the answer is yes. In fact, we're going to talk about at least one before the show's over. It just depends on what you mean solved. For me, what it means is that remains are found and a cause of death has been determined, whether it was suicide, murder, natural causes, whatever. That is my definition of solved. So, for example, the Tom Brown case, remains found, no cause of death. So in my mind, not solved yet. My mind. On the other hand, we have a situation like Angie Arnell's disappearance that we covered, where her husband went to jail for 4 years for her disappearance, but still her remains have not been found. So to me, in Unfound world, not solved. Laura Bible, Ashley Freeman. There's a guy who's been charged with their murders, going to go on trial or whatever happens there. But their remains have not been found. Not solved. Not solved. Whereas, for example, recently, Andrea Bowman, remains found. And of course, everybody believes those are her remains. And her adopted father, Dennis Bowman, seemingly has fessed up to murdering Andrea. To me, solved. So it just depends on what your definition of solved means. But yes, the answer is yes. However, there are a few where they are only 50% solved, in that somebody's been charged or remains have been found, but we have quite a few of those. Zoe Campos, for example, solved. Remains found, she was murdered, and the guy who killed her is in custody. I still don't know what's going on there, whether he's going to go pleading guilty. I don't know. But that one, solved. So the answer is yes. And I'm not saying that Unfound has had a ton to do with any of those particular ones that I've mentioned, but I can certainly tell you this, is that in a few of them, I think we have. I think we've certainly helped in Tom Brown's case. I certainly believe that in Andrea Bowman's case, I know that I remember at one time Kathy Turkanian told me that She played the interview that we did for the program to the detectives in Andrea's case, and they thought that it was extremely helpful. And then we have a couple years later, of course, we know that Dennis Bowman's been charged with a murder, and then Kathy was exactly right. Andrea's remains were found on that land where the Bowmans lived. So some of these guests that I have will say absolutely that Unfound has certainly helped. So I go by what it's not me saying this, it's them saying this. So there you go. Cherie says, or the person has been found alive. Absolutely, Cherie. If we haven't had one of those yet, unfortunately, but if a missing person, a case that we covered, disappearance, and the person is found alive, then of course that would be considered to be solved as well. Thank you for bringing that out, Cherie. Yes. So, April, to answer your question, yes. Not as many as we would like. There's a reason that so many missing persons cases are unsolved, especially if they go past 1 year. They're very difficult. Usually you have no forensics and you just have a lot of circumstantial evidence. Okay, they're very, very difficult. But we, of course, believe that it is very important that police departments and families and anybody else never forgets these people and continues to work these disappearances as well as they can. Okay. Even though it's very difficult. And I've said many times, unfortunately, if I live to be 85 years old, unfortunately, probably many of the cases that Unfound is covered, even just to now, will not be solved 35 years from now. And it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. But I know that's what the statistics say. I don't know which cases. Angela, one thing you could do, being that Natasha's done it, she has arranged the videos on this channel in the playlists by state. So you could look at Texas or Florida, and all of those, you can play all of the Texas ones together, all the Florida ones together, all the California ones together. You could do it that way. Being that we're right here on YouTube right now, that might be the easiest way to do it. So, April, thank you for the question. And, of course, I'm going to continue to try to work with April as much as I can to figure out what happened to Eric. And once again, we'll get into that in a second. Now, Lorenzo, who I believe is Eric's, I don't know if it's one of his brothers or a cousin. Unfortunately, Lorenzo, I don't know which it is. But Lorenzo from Eric's family also asked me, how often do members, listeners, come forward with new info? Actually, I wouldn't say how often. As the statistic that I would use, that I think is fair, that we've moved forward about a third of the cases that Unfound is covered. So 160 some, over 50, where somebody has come forward, people got re-engaged, new info came out. In fact, I will tell you that even in a case, Lisa Shuttleworth, that we covered how long ago, maybe 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago, I just got a message from somebody yesterday and I forwarded on to Lisa's son, who was the guest for that episode, a guy who thinks he knows something. He listened to the episode and said, you know what? I seem to remember at the time, and the guy sounded somewhat credible to me. So I forward that along to Lisa's son, and it's up to him to determine what he wants to do with it. And there was a lot of specific information about where this, suspect, person of interest lived at the time, and it's not somebody who was mentioned in the episode. But we talked about what his age was at the time, what he was doing at the time, etc. And anytime I get information like that it comes to me, I forward it right to the guest. I do not go to the police with it. I send it to the guest. We talk about it. And then it's up to them to determine what they want to do. I'm not taking them out of the loop. by going directly to the police. I go to them first, and then they can make a decision what they want to do with it. So the answer is yes, Lorenzo. In fact, the case that Eric's dad, believe. Okay, Eric's dad, Lorenzo. Okay, thank you for somebody for telling me that. I can give you probably the best example. Of course, there's the Tom Brown case where the video came out and put a lot of the spotlight on the sheriff's office in Hemphill County. And some people would say that those video from that night was which started the downfall of the sheriff's department and Nathan Lewis, etc. Some people would say that. But the case that I always think of is Peggy and Patty McDaniel, in that was a case when I found out about it in February of 2017, so like 3 years ago. If you did a search for Peggy and Patty McDaniel, you only got the picture, one of their pictures, not both, just one of the twins' pictures. And by the time that Unfound covered it, there was a listener who got very involved, contacted one of my favorite people, Joyce Rivatuzo, the guest, their mother. And by the end of that year, Joyce was being recognized at Florida's Missing Persons Day in Tallahassee. A case that everybody except Joyce's family, everybody had forgotten about. I remember at the time there was one Reddit post about it, and that was it. And then she's getting recognized 10 months later, and there's police officers there, detectives talking to her about her daughters, and now everybody knows about their disappearance and what happened. So that is the effect that this program can have when people get involved and they take an interest. And there are other examples like that as well. But of course, Tom Brown's case and Peggy and Patty McDaniel's disappearances are the ones that come to me right now. But Unfound is, we are a combination of things. Obviously, we are a media outlet, but we are also consultants who work for free. I work, if any guests ever contact me, former guests contact me, they want to talk about things, I do that for free. We do have some connections within the missing persons community. Maybe we can link people up, together. We perform a lot of different functions here, in addition to just being a media outlet where I interview families who have lost loved ones. We do a lot of things behind the scenes and talking to people. But ultimately, as I've said, it's ultimately the family of the missing person who needs to keep on this. They can't be reactive. Whether it's Eric Alvarado's case, where we believe there was some funny stuff going on with the police with Jimmy Hicks, who lived next door, whether that's the situation or that's not the situation in a disappearance, the family should always be working for themselves and doing things on their own to find out what happened. Because waiting for other people to do it, people who are supposed to do it, you may be waiting a while. Yeah, Cherie brings up another point, is that there's some disappearances that we've covered on Unfound that when we got to them, they didn't even have Facebook pages. Didn't. And that would be several. But, what then happens is that listeners find out about that. They come forward, they contact the guest, and a lot of my guests, don't know how to do that. Don't know how to set up Facebook pages, but listeners do. And they get together and they build a Facebook page together. And with pictures and video and everything else. So that's, it's not me doing it. It's not necessarily any of my assistants doing it, although I know Sharia has helped in one case, and I know Carrie has done some things too. But a lot of times it's listeners who have no connection to the program other than just listening who come forward to do it. So we do a lot of different things. We cause a lot of things to happen. We do get other people involved. This isn't just a podcast where we do interviews every Friday and then we go home. It's much more than that. So, Lorenzo, to succinctly answer your question, about a third of the time, new information comes out. But I think the strength of Unfound is us looking at what we've been told regarding a disappearance and giving family members ideas about what they can do next. Because we have experience in that area, because we have covered so many disappearances. And if we see holes in what's been done so far, then we can give them, some ideas about what they, need to do. Just to speak, if April and Lorenzo are going to watch this, what I feel about Eric's case, and so we'll just go into that now, is that there are probably just too many rumors. I think that those rumors need to be narrowed. Of course, we did not talk about them during the interview, but I'm telling you, there are many. And at some point, somebody has to start narrowing it down which rumors could be true and which ones are just street talk. And it just doesn't feel to me like that has been done. And I get the feeling is that, they could be waiting for the police to do this and go out and talk to Cassius or Mason or all, a connection or whatever. Police aren't going to do that. They might do it once just to see. But even in cases where the investigator isn't the next door neighbor, they'll give it one shot and that'll be it. And the way I see Eric Alvarado's disappearance is that the best thing the family can start doing is, I know this is not easy. I know it can be dangerous given maybe some of the people involved, but if they're going to hear 5 different theories that obviously cannot be connected to each other, then they need to start ruling in or ruling out people involved in each theory and start poking around and start asking hard questions and going to where these people are or getting them on the phone and seeing what they say about Eric's disappearance. And because the problem, as I wrote about in the Patreon blog, not to give it away, but because that's private, it's if you want to read the blog, it's $2 a month at patreon.com/Unfound podcast. Is that when families allow rumors to swirl and the family itself, is saying, well, it could be this theory, and they're very public about it, all that does is invite more theories. That's all it does. Theories that can't be proven invite more theories, more talk, more people trying to get attention for themselves, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? So it would be my idea that the family shouldn't be talking publicly about theories. They should know what those rumors, things are and try to solve them for themselves. And I think then eventually by keeping the talk to a minimum, that will keep other people from talking as well. People who just want to, and people who have no idea what they're talking about. That is, that's my idea regarding Eric Alvarado's disappearance. And it's my idea for many of the cases that we've covered where there are multiple theories. Is that the worst thing that can happen is the family goes out there and saying, we heard this and we heard that. And that's why we don't do theories on Unfound. Because that only invites more rumors and speculation and things. So that's the direction I think the Alvarado family should be headed in, regarding all of this. Carrie says, most cases, the episode is the first half of the work. We keep going week afterward. That is totally true. Michelle, everyone, please X out of the live link bottom right below Ed, then like the podcast, and then hit live chat, and we'll bring you right back on chat. You can still hear everything. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for being the technical wizard there. I appreciate that. So April and Lorenzo, I hope that's helped. Now, let's talk about the Eric Alvarado poll that was out in the group. And this is where maybe it'll get a little more controversial. By the way, this is going to be a long show tonight, so everybody get comfortable. And if you need to go to bed at 10 o'clock or whatever, you can catch it tomorrow. But we're going to go long because I have a lot of things I need to talk about. The Eric Alvarado poll. Very few people believe that Eric parked his Jeep out there. In fact, I think it was only maybe 4 or 5 people that thought he did park it out there. And the vast majority of people believe that somebody else parked it out there. Now, you don't need to be a missing persons expert to know that if somebody else parked his Jeep out there, that means that something of a foul play nature probably happened to Eric. That exponentially increases the chances that something happened to Eric of a foul play nature. That probably he was murdered by whoever. If somebody else parked the Jeep out there. Now, I will have you know, I'm not so sure about that. I'm just not so sure that Eric didn't park it out there. That's my opinion. In fact, if somebody were to put me, if I were to vote in my own poll that I posted, I would have to admit that I do believe that Eric parked the Jeep out there. Don't get me wrong. I know a vast majority of people believe that he did not park it out there. I realize that. Okay, I'm not saying they're crazy. They're not crazy. All right, totally sensible. That's just not the way I think about it. Even in the think tank that we had on Sunday night, once again, if you want to be a member of the think tank, patreon.com/Unfound podcast, and join at the $12 a month level or above. Please check that out. We did not come to a consensus on too much regarding Eric's disappearance. I felt that I was already in my attitude that Eric parked that Jeep out there himself. Other people thought that he didn't. And so it's a stumper. And that's, these are the types of cases that do generate theories because it could go either way. It really could. And so even in the think tank, in a small group, I think we had maybe 10 people in there on Sunday evening. A lot of different theories and points of view being thrown around. Now, why is it now? So that was the Eric Alvarado poll. Now, why is it that maybe I am in a very small minority regarding Eric Alvarado's disappearance in thinking that he actually did park his Jeep out there? Well, that takes me to the next topic, and that is the disappearance and death, now we know, of Crystal Morrison. I think that, there are some comparisons that can be made between Crystal Morrison's disappearance and death and Eric Alvarado's disappearance. Now, the reason I bring up Crystal Morrison is because that was a disappearance, and I even wrote this in the book at the time. It was season 2, volume 1, that I believe she was murdered or at least overdosed. Somebody picked her up and she overdosed. I now know that is not what happened. You should know that I spoke to her sister, Michelle, on Sunday, and I'm not going to tell you the complete content of that conversation, but I will tell you that Crystal's family is very, very confident that uh, there was no foul play regarding Crystal's death, and there was not an overdose either. They're very satisfied that there's not a suspect running around out there who murdered her and has gotten away with it. Nothing like that. The way I would explain it in my own words is that it seems like just a bunch of unfortunate things came together on that day that got the better of Crystal on that day. That's how I would explain it. And like I said, I really don't want to go into any of the specifics and what Michelle and I talked about. But if Crystal's family is very satisfied that she died of natural causes on that day, then I'm with them. But as I said, easy to happen. She called somebody to pick her up, and then she wasn't there. When they came to pick her up, and then we find out where her remains were found. It was nowhere near where she worked, although it was very close to where she was last seen. It's just one of those puzzling things. But like I said, her family, the way they understand it, very confident that that's exactly what happened. So, even though it looked like foul play, it wasn't. So in Eric Alvarado's situation, I can't forget, and this is what we're supposed to be doing here, is when we look at cases, it helps to look at other disappearances that we know that have been solved, even though we don't have a ton of them in Unfound's catalog. At least look at them and see if anything can be brought from that to this case, this disappearance that we're covering this week. And so in looking at Eric Alvarado's disappearance, I am reminded of Crystal Morrison's and being so confident that, yes, she was murdered, something like that. She was given a hot shot, and now we know that wasn't the situation at all. So I'm trying to remember that in Eric Alvarado's case, even though eventually I could be proven to be totally wrong, like I was in Crystal Morrison. Maybe it just flipped now. In Crystal Morrison's, I thought she was murdered. That's not what happened. In Eric Alvarado's, I think that he parked his own Jeep. We may eventually find out that he didn't park his own Jeep. But I'm just, I want to make sure that I am tapping into those cases we've covered in the past and compare them to the ones here in the present. Cherie says, how can they be so sure when they have no idea in more recent cases like Tom Brown, for instance? Well, first of all, Cherie, very good question. Let's just say this, that there was more of Crystal there than with Tom's case. All right, there were more remains of Crystal where they found her than, the number that's been thrown out there is only 30% of Tom Brown was found. That percentage was much higher, if not 100%, in Crystal's situation. So that might have something to do with it. Okay, could be. Carrie, Crystal's family has closure and Crystal's home and rest in peace. Yeah, it's a bitter, as I've said, bittersweet. They want to know the answers, and then they get the answers, and it turns out that Crystal did die when she disappeared, and not too far away. But I will say one thing. I think I can say this. You may ask, well, didn't they do some searches at that time? They did. Unfortunately, and this is one of those, this is how things work sometimes. She was found, she was on private property, and the person who owned the property would not allow people to go search on it. It can make the biggest difference. Just something like that. So if you're wondering, well, didn't they do searches? Why wasn't she found? They didn't look in that area where she was found. They weren't allowed. There you go. Hello, August. You don't have to apologize to me. Thanks for tuning in. So we got Eric Alvarado, Paul. We have Crystal Morrison, and I will be doing an in memoriam for Crystal. I will be doing an episode very much like Zoe Campus's soon, because we are not. Even though her disappearance is now case closed, we're not going to forget her, and we're going to do an episode, to show respect to her. And so, nobody, forgets, that she was a real person. Let's move on. Ashley Summers, case that we covered 2018, 2017. The years start to run together after a while. I think it was 2018. The last person to see her uncle, Kevin Donathan, yesterday was charged, sentenced to 35 years in prison for sexual abuse, sexual molestation, all of that bad stuff, with underage kids, including children in his own family. And this is the guy, and I posted that in the group, and I know some other people posted it as well. But he is now in jail, and he was the last person to see Ashley. She was living with him at the time. And so pretty much when I did the interview with Linda, her ex-grandmother, it's a unique connection. We were right then, and we were right now. And in fact, I can tell you this, and I remember the conversation like it was yesterday when I was talking to Linda, and she was explaining to me about Kevin and everything else. And I, like it was yesterday, I can remember saying to her, he probably has some of the effect, probably he has something for little kids, right? It was something that she said, the way she described it. He was known as the cool uncle, and he always wanted to be around the little kids. She said something like that. And I said, he probably has some. And this was before any of this stuff came out. Little did I know how right I was. And so, in my opinion, there is no other suspect in Ashley Summers' disappearance. In fact, I will go on to say that I am sure that there are other adults in that family who know that Kevin did it, and they're kind of covering up too. There's not much doubt in my mind at all. You can go back and listen to that interview for yourself to, make your own decision. But just a lot. This was just not the work. I think one guy instigated it, that being Kevin. But I got to believe that there were other people who eventually became involved. Pretty sure. What's August? Question for the listeners. Newbie here who'd like to purchase Unfound merchandise and make a donation. Did my Spotify, my Shopify was without success? Not my Spotify. It should be my Shopify, August. Maybe you typed it in wrong. I'm waiting on Ed. Well, first of all, August, it's my Shopify, not my Spotify. So maybe you typed in the wrong address, but it's unfound-podcast.myshopify.com. And if you'd like to make a contribution to the program at PayPal, it's unfoundpodcast@gmail.com. Or August, if you'd like to become a Patreon member, it's patreon.com/unfoundpodcast. There you go. So there's Ashley Summers. Now, is Kevin ever going to talk? Well, I don't know. 35 years is a long time. So hard to say. It's just hard to say. As we know, most killers and people in these situations do not reveal the locations of bodies most of the time. Dennis Bowman. I'm not even sure they revealed it. They just kind of knew they were going to go on that land and they found it. It's not like he told them where to go. So I'm not even sure, even in his case, he told them anything. So we just have to realize that these types of people rarely give up where bodies are buried or left or, whatever else. So I'm not too hopeful that Kevin is going to say anything. I don't have high hopes for that, but maybe, but there's no doubt in my mind, that something happened that day between him and Ashley, and he killed her. No doubt in my mind. None. Zero. So you can find. I'm sure there's going to be some other articles on that. If nothing else, it brings more attention back to Ashley's disappearance, and now police can know for sure that Kevin did something to her, and maybe that'll help them in their investigation. Let's move on to this. Sherry Mahan, I want to talk about this because it's the 35th, just past the 35th anniversary of her disappearance. The reason it's important to me is because she disappeared about a half hour from where I used to live in Leechburg, Pennsylvania. And I remember it when it happened in 1985. And if you go right here on YouTube channel, I actually went to the very spot where she disappeared in 2018. And I actually got to talk to a guy who was on the bus with her that day. And he saw her get out. So I got to talk to him. And so you can find that video right here on the YouTube channel. She disappeared from Saxonburg, Cabot, Pennsylvania. Very, very, very small little town. Not even hardly a town. Does it even have a stoplight? I don't even know. But kind of out in the farmlands, hinterlands of Pennsylvania where she disappeared. Sherry Mahan's disappearance is a perfect example why the disappearance of children are very difficult to cover and feature. I know our mother's been doing a lot over the last 35 years, but there was a lot going on in that family at the time, and just hard to say. And this, if the case doesn't ring a bell to you, this is a case where a van with a skier painted on the side was allegedly seen around that time in the area, and the van's never been seen again, either before or after. So, of course, many people believe that somebody in that van picked Sherry up and then she disappeared. Just don't know. But the 35th anniversary just passed, and it's one that is stuck out in my mind all this time. Cherie says Sherry's disappearance is the first one I remember being aware of. Cherie and I are close in age. I remember seeing her on a poster in a grocery store and thought how awful it would be to go missing. Yeah, Cherie. That happened half hour from where I grew up in Leechburg, Pennsylvania. Yeah. It was huge news. People looking all over the area, and still that case is unsolved. So once again, if you're not familiar with that disappearance, look into it. And then you can watch my video on it where I have my phone and I walk where she would have been dropped off from the bus and where she would have walked going down toward her house. And you can check that out for yourself. Be looking for the newsletter this weekend. Of course, March 1st is Sunday. So be looking for the newsletter, the next newsletter this weekend. If you're on the email list, you'll get it. If you're not, contact me. We can make that happen. Hey, Renee, if you ever get into the show late, no need to apologize. You can always watch it later. But hello, Renee. How you doing? Doris asked me, do you know why there wasn't an autopsy on Thomas Brown? I heard his body was dismembered. Well, first of all, Doris, there was only 30% of it. Once again, from what I've heard, there was only 30% of it. And I don't know how you do an autopsy on 30%. And I don't even know what 30% is. To listen to some people say it, his skull was there, but I don't know what other body parts were there. So I don't know. So I don't know how you do an autopsy with that. Doris, I just don't know. And you're welcome, Renee. Let me take another question. Alexis asked me this question. Thank you, Renee. Alexis asked me this question. There's a story out of Texas. 262 cattle were stolen. And she wanted to know if I, have any opinion on this, insight into this at all. I don't know anything about, I eat steak, but that's as much as I know about cattle. And I could never be a farmer or anything like that. But Alexis, if you're watching, 262 cattle are quite a few cattle. I don't know how many they can fit into one of those 18-wheelers that hauls cattle. 40 maybe, 30? I mean, it would take like nine trucks to steal 262 cattle. 9? I just don't know enough about here's what I think I know. I know that farmers or cattle ranchers don't count their cattle every day, first of all. Second of all, I'm not even sure they go out to see if the cattle are there every day. So it very well could be that this theft was done over a period of time, a few days, let's say. But I'm going to guess this wasn't something that was done during daylight hours either. So how do you rustle up 262 cattle over a period of nights with no one else seeing? I don't know. Missing planes, missing cattle. Yeah, well, I know about missing planes, Sheree. I don't know anything about. I'm doing my best with missing cattle. Carrie says here they do it frequently. That money is on hooves. Sounds like a stampede. BA says. Renee, did I miss his opinion on the jars? I'm not going to talk about jars with babies' tongues in it, Renee. I'm not going to do that. Michelle says, dang, sure, not 200 cattle. My family is ranchers. Really seems you would think that would be noticed. And yes, my grandfather counted and fed daily. Okay. Pastures seen from the house. Alexis, if you're watching, I think we need to know more about where this ranch was and where the rancher lived. And we need a lot more particulars about this. And I would not rule out the idea that this is some sort of scam. I would not rule that out. I mean, you get up to 262 cattle, 262. And, like I said, it'd be like a convoy of trucks going in and out of there. And, the time it would take for, it would be a huge operation. I'm thinking with multiple people. And I'm guessing they'd have to go out there and maybe on horses and bring, it just sounds, it's so, it's like Cherie says, I'm thinking they need to check with their friends. You know what I'm thinking of? I'm thinking of the movie Goldfinger. And I know this is, I'm a huge James Bond fan, where James Bond during the movie calculates in his head how many trucks and how much time, how many people, etc., it would take to take all of the gold out of Fort Knox, and he comes to the conclusion that it's almost to the point of not being able to be done, and that's when Goldfinger says, "Whoever talked about removing the gold?" And that's when you find out his plan is to irradiate the gold so it can't be used, so his gold will go up in value. This feels like that you start calculating everything that it would take to steal 262 cattle, and it gets to the point of outrageousness. I don't know, the thing is, I don't know how much money 262 cattle would cost, but it would be a huge operation with multiple people, and I'm sure they'd want their cut. I mean, I'm thinking it would get to the point where the amount that each person was going to get would not be worth the risk if they got caught. So there's just something about this story that seems funny to me, but once again, I don't know anything about cattle or anything else. Three says that with 262, about a half a mil. And then you'd have to figure out how many people, how many truck drivers would you need? How many people, to be on horses, to go out there and to bring them in? Half a mil, if you have 10 people, that's $50,000 a person. I mean, nobody turns down $50,000, but on the other hand, there seems to be so much risk in it of getting caught that you'd think people would want more than that. No, I haven't seen it, Renee. Sorry, I have not seen it. Cattle could have been insured, money in the bank twice. Well, Doris, that is a possibility. Hey, we've had we look at the Gardner Museum heist in Boston from 30 years ago, where two guys went in and stole all those paintings, and those paintings are still missing. But even that, is a lot simpler, a lot easier. I wouldn't say it's safer, but those paintings, we talk about stealing 262 cattle for half a mil. One of those paintings in that museum was worth more than that. So I get it. Not that I would ever steal anything, but two guys to say, hey, we're going to go into this museum and steal these paintings that are worth. I get that. I don't get 8 or 10 people getting together to steal under 262 cattle for $500,000. Thank you, Indy. I'm sure the cattle are insured. I guess what I'm saying is that there's just something about it that doesn't seem reasonable to me. If you told me it was 40 cattle that you could fit like in one trailer or something, I get it. If it was, what else do people have, chickens or something, I don't know. Say somebody went into one of these chicken farms with all those chickens, the mass production chickens, and stole 500 chickens or 262 chickens. I get it. They aren't that big. 262 cattle? I don't know. Crazy. I love a good heist, Sheree says, but except when it's cattle. Yeah. There's just something about it that seems funny, and I think that there's, if I was the Texas Rangers, is that who's looking into this? I would be taking a serious look at the rancher himself. Let's move on to another question. Suzanne asked me, why is commenting turned off for all the videos on YouTube? Suzanne, good question. I've answered it before, but I'll be happy to answer it again because I know that the YouTube channel has been getting a lot of attention recently. The reason is this. You get a lot of trolls on YouTube, and we do not have a way to control it. Unlike the group where we can admit people in and we are able to keep a close eye on it and kick people out. Virtually anybody can come along and comment on any video at any time. And I'm not going to, I don't want to do it. And so I'm not going to task anybody to do it, to continually watch. I mean, how many videos do we have on there? 200 videos or something now? You know, to continually watch 200 videos for trolls and whatever they're posting, because the fact is this: covering these disappearances, what like we do, does bring trolls out of the woodwork. Haters of me, haters of the guests, haters of the person that disappeared, they come out. I've seen it. And I just don't want any of the videos themselves to be polluted with people like that. And so that's the reason. Okay, that's the reason. That it's just too hard to police and keep everything nice and neat and clean, etc. Okay? If somebody wants to comment on a particular disappearance and it has something useful, of course they can contact me. They can come into the Facebook group. There's a variety. They can go to the Facebook page of the disappearance. They can do a multiple other things as far as comments, anything else. It's just too much to manage. You should also remember something else. This is maybe not so obvious. Is that, oh, Susan, you asked the question. Yeah, well, it's true. The other thing is this, Suzanne, is that a lot of times, we can show that. Yeah, it does stink, Renee, it does. A lot of times the reason people keep the comments on their videos open, even if they're getting a lot of trollish behavior and, you know, people arguing back and forth. You know why they do that, Suzanne? Because every time that person comes back to respond to a comment some other troll that made, that counts as a view. As soon as you go onto it and the video starts playing, that counts as a view. And so you can artificially bump up your viewing numbers by keeping the comments open. I don't want to do that. I want to know the true viewership for each of those videos. So what it means is when people come to that, the only reason they're coming to that particular page on YouTube is for the video, not to comment. So, so when you see a lot of these places that have these outrageous amount of views and everything, it's that's the reason. Because people are, you know, getting into some argument, they get into some, and then the views go up, but it's not a true indication of how many people are actually watching the videos. So there's that. I think that we are in enough places where people, they want to comment on a disappearance. We have enough other venues where they can do that. I really believe that. So, Suzanne, that is the answer. It's a good question. I've gotten it before. It's a fair question because you're right. Most other places, they do allow comments. And I would tell you this. If YouTube was, or Unfound was a YouTube program, meaning kind of like John Lorden's Brain Scratch, let's just say, an example, only an example, where his show is on YouTube exclusively, then I can see why the comments section would be open. I can see that. But Unfound is not a YouTube-based program. It's a podcast without video, without pictures. And, you know, that is a supplement. What Natasha is doing is supplementing that with pictures, and like I was doing myself until she came along. And so it's to reach more of an audience, absolutely, and we do use it for other reasons, but that is not the primary location for the program. I almost look at that as like a bonus. And once again, there aren't too many podcasts out there that have an audio program that is then also converted into a video program. That is very rare. but we do it here. So, Cherie says, in reality, though, YouTubers with 1 million views don't even read their comments. That is certainly true, Cherie. Carrie says, there are days when we can barely keep up with the Facebook comments without drama. That's true. And yeah, just imagine if it was just a free-for-all on YouTube where, you know, it's much easier to get a YouTube account than it is a Facebook account. So there you go, Suzanne. Let's move on to, like I said, we're going long tonight. I got a lot of good stuff to talk about. Got to talk about this. Got to talk about it. There was an article on Snopes.com just within the past few days, maybe week. You're welcome, Suzanne. And if you don't know what Snopes is, Snopes, I don't know how totally legitimate it is. I'm going to say that I've not been to this website very often in my life. I know they do a lot of different things, trying to fact check politicians and political issues and things that are put out in the media, not just in politics, but sports, etc. And they try to verify whether that is true or not. Well, they did that for this map that is out there, and I've seen it. I've never commented on it, but this map that is out there that allegedly shows how many disappearances in the United States happen close to the cave system in the United States. If you don't know, in the United States, we do have a prominent cave system. I think maybe most people think about the caves in the Appalachian Mountains along the east of the United States, you know, Tennessee, Kentucky, Carlsbad Cavern, etc. Well, there are caves, of course, out west, and Native Americans way back in the day used to use those caves as dwellings. You can go into Colorado, Arizona, etc. Well, there is a map out there trying to make a correlation between the cave system and disappearances in the United States. Now, and you know who's doing that. I'm not going to mention this person's name. And Snopes does a very good job. I don't know what kind of job they do on anything else that they analyze, but on this, they did a very good job. And, you know, they quickly point out in analysis is that the map is misleading because it does not show all of the disappearances in the United States. Now, nobody knows more about disappearances in the United States than I do. Okay, nobody overall. And it's, of course, correct. And the map is very misleading. It is certainly meant to push an agenda. Certainly. But I think what this shows overall is that if you selectively pick disappearances, whether it's in the United States, Canada, Africa, Europe, I don't care, you can make anything look true. If you're going to selectively pick certain disappearances that fit states, just for example, I could go through and make it look like an unusual amount of disappearances occurred near cell phone towers. I could make a map making it look like an unusual amount of disappearances occur near amusement parks. I could make an unusual amount of disappearances make it look like an unusual amount occur near Starbucks. I could make a map making it look an unusual amount occur near fire hydrants. Pick anything. Pick any landmark, any food chain, gas station, anything. You can make anything. If you're going to selectively pick data points, you can make anything true. Anything. I've dismissed it. I've kind of talked about it, but in other terms over the course of doing this live show. Snopes does as good a job as I've seen of looking at this map and saying, you know, and they mentioned the person who put this map together. I'm not going to mention this person. But if you can go to Snopes.com, you'll find it. But what it really does, first of all, disappearances happen all over the United States. All over. Cities, national parks, state parks, local parks, the country, the city, boats, cars disappear, planes disappear, boats disappear all over the place. There is no pattern. Anybody can disappear at any time. It doesn't matter if you're white, black, Hispanic, Asian, doesn't matter. Male, female, doesn't matter. Income, wealth, doesn't matter. In a relationship, now we do know that there are correlations between disappearances and being in relationships. That is certainly true. But you know what? Single people disappear. There is certainly a correlation, an increased correlation between drug use and disappearances. But you know what? A lot of sober people disappear too. There are no patterns like that at all. Okay, at all. Yeah, cattle disappears. Thank you, Cherie. Thank you for injecting some humor into this. Okay? That's what I want you to get. If you go to Snopes.com and you look into that, I hope that's what you get out of it. Okay? This is no different than the smiley face killer thing. No person, no responsible person looking into any of this would ever say that there's some group out there that's seriously creeping around the United States looking for drunk men to throw into the water. Okay? I can see that as the plot for a really good fiction movie. But here in real life, you know, I think what maybe, you know, being on this side of the microphone, I just don't know if the public and, you know, many listeners understand how desperate people on this side of the microphone can be for attention. Okay? And it's just not in true crime, but it's in anything. Anything. And because of that, they will say anything and they will do anything. And you just can never, you know, there's I have a good friend of mine. His name is Dave. I went to college with him, one of my best friends of all time. And I often talk to him about this because he knows that I have this program. He knows that I have a unique situation doing this program, and you know, he greatly respects what I do. But you know, I tell him about being on this side of the microphone and doing a program and having attention put on your program and yourself and people hearing you and everything. And you know, I tell them how I see so many people that are in my position maybe doing the same thing or even something different, and how desperate it seems, how desperate they want attention. And you know, and this is how this is how a map like that gets created. That's how it gets created. And I look at it no different than the JFK assassination. You know, that's 57 years ago. And still there are new books coming out as if there is new information about it. I don't care if you believe that Lee Harvey Oswald worked by himself or there were 10 guys out there trying to shoot JFK that day. That there's no information on it. There is no new information, but it's a cottage industry. So people write books because they know if they write a book, even though they can't get anything else published, they can't get attention for anything else they've ever done. But you know what? If I write a JFK book, man, it's just going to be so popular. And they're right. They're not saying anything new. So that's how I look at a lot of this stuff. And here's what I know for sure. This kind of stuff that I'm talking about doesn't help solve any missing persons cases. It does a lot, but the only thing we should be concerned about is solving these disappearances, and these kinds of maps and things don't do that. But it certainly helps that the person who does it certainly gets a lot of attention. So I don't know. Yeah, Shri says like a new Civil War book. I'm not saying that Civil War books aren't worthy, but it's not like somebody's going to bring out a new book and say, well, we just discovered there was this battle that nobody knew about. So, you know, I've had a chance. I've had a lot of time to think about this stuff, and like I said, you never know how people on this side of the microphone how desperate they can become, and to find some angle, to be seen as finding something, they'll say anything. They'll write anything. They'll publish anything, and it's really disgusting. It really is. It really. And this is why, you know, I like I said, I realize that I'm unique. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but I can't relate to that thinking. I'm much more interested in building relationships with people who have been doing this for a long time, like Dr. Telesco at Nova Southeastern University, like Detective Kenneth Maines from ASOC, like Caroline Lowe, who's been a journalist for 35 years and covered Joe Husentrut's disappearance and Jacob Wetterling's disappearance. I want to be in on a team with them. Serious people who are not into the sensationalism or anything like that. They are professionals. That's who I want to be on the same team with. I don't want to be on the same team as the same person who made that map. So there you go. I also need to talk about this. We're going on an hour and 25 minutes, and it's just going really well tonight. Christy Witcher. If you will, I posted this in a group yesterday, maybe. She is finally identified. She was a woman who left her in 1993. Her remains were found in 1995. Her throat had been slashed. It's certainly a murder. And she was finally identified after 25 years. She was found in a shallow grave, you know, not near where she lived. It's certainly a murder. And the reason I'm talking about it is the Unfound was this close to covering this disappearance. I'm going to say maybe back, I don't know, August, September of last year. Emily had gotten in contact with Christy's daughter. And it was at that time that the daughter told me that there were remains that had been found, and they were currently trying to match DNA and, you know, to find out if this was her mother or not. And what I had told the daughter is that, well, you know, you let me know how it progresses, and if it turns out that it's not your mother and it's somebody else, I would certainly love to have you on the program, and, you know, let's cover it. Well, it turns out it was her mother. And they finally figured it out. And so this is now a murder case. Why it took so long because the police had the DNA, I don't know. In fact, that was a conversation I had with, her name is Becca, last year. You know, why is it taking so long? You know, I still don't know that. But so another missing person has been identified, and now it can move to looking who could have murdered her. And you should know, I did ask Becca about that, any possibilities, and she says, you know, not that she knows. So I just don't know. I just don't know. Carrie says this goes back, speaking of the map situation, this goes back to a conversation we had this week. People should not be into missing persons cases for money. In my opinion, it is ghosts are trying to make money off others people's pain. Yeah. Kathy says, Doris, I thought Patty Action in Florida could have been killed by a serial killer who is in jail. Yeah, that was a question Doris asked before. Have I ever reviewed a disappearance and think it'd be tied to a serial killer? Yes, Doris. In fact, If you look up, Doris, if you look up the disappearance of Debbie Lowe, a girl who disappeared in Southeast Florida back in the 70s, she was almost certainly killed by Gerard Schaefer, who was a serial killer. So that's one that comes to mind, Doris. There may be one or two others, but that's the one that comes to mind. So yes, the simple answer is yes. Yeah. But Christy Witcher, they've now been able to identify her, and we'll see if they can try to figure out who murdered her. Don't know. Like I said, her daughter doesn't have any idea on who that could be right now. Cherie says Dennis Bowman is probably a serial killer. Cherie, that's a good point. Thank you for that. That is certainly a possibility. Certainly. I think that behind the scenes, between myself, Cherie, Heather, Carrie, and the rest of the assistants, we've had enough conversations that we've come to the conclusion that Dennis Bowman is almost certainly a serial killer, having killed Andrea, the woman in Virginia, and at least a few other women. There's not much doubt in our minds. Okay, I'm gonna answer one last question here. And Tanya, I think you may be in here, maybe not. Do we file FOIAs? The answer is sometimes. You have to understand something about FOIAs. You file one, you could be waiting a long time before you get the information. So generally what we do, thank you, Toy. Generally what we do is that at least from my standpoint, is that a lot of our guests don't even know what FOIAs are. And if you don't know what FOIA, Freedom of Information Act request, FOIA request form, where you fill out this paperwork and the police, or you can use a FOIA for anything regarding government. And eventually they'll send you something back. It may not be as much as you'd like. And that's something you have to remember is when you file a FOIA, it's not like you automatically get access to every single piece of information on a disappearance or anything else, especially if the case is still open. Now, if it's been closed, for example, Dr. Eric Grabowski, last year he worked on a FOIA for something we're looking into in Texas. He got a wealth of information from that FOIA because the murder cases, it's closed, it's done. In fact, the guy who committed them was executed. So it's, done. So we were able to get it even though it took some time. Whereas if you file a FOIA on, a missing persons case or something, it's really, a crapshoot as to what you're going to get back. That hasn't stopped us from trying to do so. In fact, we have. In fact, Cherie is in the process of filling out a FOIA on something that I really can't talk about. And Toy is bringing up another thing. The other thing about FOIAs, sometimes some departments, some government organizations will make you pay. And sometimes it can be a little expensive. So that, of course, figures into it as well. What we try to do is sometimes we will, but really what we try to do is I or one of my assistants will try to coach the family on how to do it if they want to do it. To me, I think it's much more efficient and quicker and more personal if the family just goes, talks to the detective and asks nicely for the information. That's what I always support. Just look them in the eye, ask them for it. Be firm, but be nice. Thank you, please. No swearing, no calling names, nothing. You do it that way when you want to get information. And if they continue to stonewall you, then you're probably going to have to go the official route and fill out the paperwork. FOIAs are perfectly fine, but you're probably going to be, once again, you're probably going to be waiting a long time. So they don't work for the way we cover cases on Unfound. Just don't. In addition, a lot of times with FOIAs, once again, you may wait a long time, and when you get the paperwork, it's like, well, I already knew all of this anyway. So, for our purposes on Unfound, they are not relevant to covering disappearances the way we do. But if there is a family that we run into that has no paperwork and everything else, then we try to coach them up and try to help them get the paperwork as much as they can. Because what we notice is that, for example, in this Friday, the disappearance of Kassandra Ramirez, which I haven't talked about yet, her mother has all of her phone records going back to August, even up past when she disappeared. We talked about a lot of phone records in Cameron Remard's case, from well before he disappeared to well after he disappeared. Whereas there are other cases where the police have the phone records, will not give them to the family. So it just depends. It just really, really depends on the kind of disappearance and a lot of different things. I haven't yet seen a correlation between all of this, but I'm guessing there's one somewhere. So what I try to do is tell them, if a family, we don't have that, cell phone information, and the police, I said, well, you should know these families over here, they've gotten the cell phone information. You are entitled to that cell phone information. You should ask for it. You should ask for it nicely. And if they're not going to hand it over to you, then you need to fill out a FOIA, do whatever it takes. Because certainly you are entitled to it, since you or your missing loved one was paying the bill. You certainly deserve to see the bill that they were, what their usage was. That's the way I put it to them. Carrie says you foul one and they typically fight back. That's true. Cherie, foul wait, deny, refoul wait. That is the FOIAs, right. Toy, they get to double charge taxpayers plus requester. They could do that. Renee, very interesting. You have to pay for it. Is it paper or digital? Renee, it depends. It depends on the amount. I will tell you that in Dr. Eric Grabowski's situation where he got a FOIA, it was sent to him on a thumb drive, whereas some other FOIAs that we've gotten in the past were paper. Most of the time they charge man hours. That's true. Cherie, exactly. They aren't just going to hand over information unless there's no way around it. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it. True. Yeah, it's not like when you file a FOIA and the police department goes, oh, thank God you filed that. I just can't wait to give you all this information. It's the exact opposite. Doris says, "Didn't find your only job, or do you have to work at another job?" This is the only thing I do. Doris, I do Unfound and I play disc golf. That's my life. So let's finally get to. No, I want to talk about one more thing. Did any of you happen to watch the Up and Vanished show that is now out on Oxygen, the one that covered Jody Huisentruit's disappearance? Anybody get a chance to watch that? I did get to watch it, and wow, there were a lot of errors in it. In fact, let's just say that I've spoken to Caroline Lowe since I watched the episode. I'm just going to leave it at that. But I noticed a lot of errors. But I'm sure that the family is happy that there was coverage. But yeah, and I will say it, I'm not an expert on Jody Huisentruit's. I know a lot about it. I've known, but I'm sure there are people out there, certainly Caroline Lowe and the people who at findjody.com know more about it than I do. But even I, in watching the episode, could see that there were things that stuck out that I know weren't right. And in addition, the way they brought Billy Pruin, this guy who was allegedly murdered, into this, there's no proof that he was murdered. There's no proof of that at all. And, this is one more reason that, I'm not trying to kick in anybody's door to get on TV. One more reason. So, you hate seeing that. You hate seeing a program that I know took a while to get to put together, and there are still mistakes. We're at Unfound, we're not perfect either. But you also have to remember most of the disappearances we cover are somewhat unknown. Surely not as well known as Jody Husentrude's. And there's still questions. Did this happen? Did that happen? But in Jody's, pretty much everything is out there over the last 25 years. I mean, she has her own website, 5jody.com. Still make mistakes that are obvious. Just don't understand it. Just don't understand it. Tons of, yeah. So some of you did watch it. Okay. Just wondering about that. Michelle, I like these shows. I think these shows need to have family view before airing because there are ways misquoting out and out. Where did that come from? Oxygen is a basic channel. They're all about making money. Nothing earth-shattering is going to happen on Oxygen. You're probably right, Shuri. It's, how do I say this without being sexist? Oxygen is kind of a women's network, right? Right? And that's not surprising, as I've talked about many times. 80% of Unfound's listenership is female, but Oxygen is, at least I think when it started, it was geared toward women. Okay. Just something comes to mind. And then for some reason, I remember that Spike TV was like the response to that. Spike TV was like the guy channel. I remember when Spike TV got started. Michelle says, no cable here, so I don't know. Michelle, you're better off. Okay, finally, let's get to this Friday's episode. It is the disappearance of Kassandra Ramirez. It's the title of the episode is Rise to Overcome. She disappeared September 19th / 20th of 2018. So once again, we have a very new disappearance. We went back to 1945 and then 1962 with Phyllis. And then we've now done 2018 disappearances in a row. You just never know when we're going to go in this program. The guest for this episode is Cassie's mother, Ingrid. I did that interview. When was that interview? A few days ago. And Cassie disappeared from the Bronx, New York. You're going to hear a story about. I'm reading what Cherie says I'm right, and Carrie says, hey, now no one can stoop and dig for info like a nosy female. I agree. Cassie Ramirez went through a lot. And as we hear so many times on this program about young women getting involved in drugs, she was at one time. She had a son born in 2010. The son died after 12 days. She was living in the basement of where she worked at one time. A lot of things going on in her life. And then she managed to kind of crawl out of that, and that's why this episode is called Rise to Overcome, how we must overcome those obstacles in our life. And then on the night of September 19th, she was picked up with a guy, John O'Brien, who was a kind of a guy that she had seen on and off, dated on and off for a while, but at that point, they were not an item. In fact, at that time, he was with another woman that he had gotten pregnant, and a witness says, Cassie and this other woman, he saw them all together. This witness saw them all together in a car. And John's story is that through the night from like 11 p.m. September 19th into the following morning, even up to 7 a.m. the next morning, Cassie had texted people through the night, called people through the night. But then at 7 a.m., she made one last phone call, and that was the last use of her phone, even though the phone continued to be on, people calling her, people texting her. She never responded to any of them. Sounds a lot like Cameron Remmer's disappearance. And what we at Unfound were able to do for this episode is that Ingrid, her mother, has her phone records, had Cassie's phone records, and she sent them to me. And between myself and my assistants, we were able to put names to all of the numbers around Cassie's disappearance. And we were able to give that back to Ingrid in the hopes that she can use those names in some way. And what's interesting, and you're going to hear about this in the interview, is that two of those numbers were used quite often before she disappeared, but both of them disappeared from her records immediately after her disappearance. And we were able to put names to both of those numbers. And we will be mentioning the names that go along with those numbers in the interview. However, what we don't know is if these people had those numbers at the time of Cassie's disappearance in September 2018. All we know is who has those numbers now. So we were able to, I think, do some good work so far in helping Ingrid out because she had no way to figure out. But we have the knowledge, and we do pay for a couple databases that we use to look up phone numbers and attach them to names and addresses. And what John's story is that he dropped Cassie off at a train station. This even reminds me of Trevor Nichols' disappearance from Syracuse, New York. He claims that he dropped Cassie off at a train station so she could ride back to her house, and that's the last time that he saw her. The problem is that the police in investigating this disappearance never went to that train station in New York City to check the video to see if Cassie was on the video. So once again, this is Kassandra Ramirez, disappeared September 19th / September 20th, 2018. The guest for the episode is Ingrid Ramirez. She disappeared from the Bronx, New York. And it's an episode that I'm calling Rise to Overcome. You will find that she is on NamUs, but her disappearance is not on the Charlie Project for whatever reason. I don't know why. But I think I'm going to call it a night with that. And it's the longest live show ever, an hour and 45 minutes. So what did we do? Told you about how I have the next few weekends off. Talked about Dr. Grace Telesco, going to be meeting with her in person in April. Talked about another university speaking opportunity that could be coming up within the next 6 weeks. The Eric Alvarado poll. Talked about Crystal Morrison. We talked about Ashley Summers, Sherry Mahan, newsletter this weekend. We talked about Snopes and how they pointed out the erroneous information in the map that tries to correlate disappearances in caves. Talked about Christy Witcher, who was finally identified after 25 years. Talked about the Jody Huisentruit Up and Vanished episode with all its mistakes. Took a bunch of excellent questions before and some questions that all of you asked. A lot of great questions tonight. And then we covered what will be this Friday's episode, the disappearance of Cassie Ramirez. That's it. Man, a long show tonight, but man, it went so fast. I had so much fun. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the support. Thank you for the viewership. Thank you for the listenership. Thank you for all the kind words. Thank you to my assistants for all the help and a lot of you tuning in tonight. Cherie, thank you for doing the moderating. Good night, everyone. See ya.